Chile here with Sirius Taurus Moon, Venus hour, Venus day. Venus is 0 degree Aries. And ascendant with Pluto. 3 degrees for Pluto, 4 degrees Aquarius. Which Venus is applying to conjoin the ruler Saturn at 2 degrees Aries. Midheaven ruled by Mars and the Moon 28 degrees Libra. I want to address a topic that I was talking about in Spirit of Matter. I think one of the early videos. And this is the topic of um, the connection between our ideas and protecting our ideas, our boundaries and sense of self, and honoring both our own and other people's sovereignty. Um, the energy siphoning occult um, is to do with extreme types of violence, um, but also to do with plagiarism and control of ideas. And this is both relevant for people owning patent companies um, that are Luciferian. Luciferianism is incompatible with patents. The reason is that the holistic sense of self is preserved by zero rape, zero slavery existence that allows the telos of life energy to emerge and materialize. The I am, I think births my thoughts, my ideas. Which is a different thing than I channel, I receive. This is why in my paintings or in my podcast, I state the difference of when I channel and when I am. Now, for people that are a part of occultistic environments, essential to protecting your ideas, Caitlin Koppak. That inspired me for the episode, but I also know people that are Luciferians and have patents companies. So um, the essential is zero rape, zero slavery society. And it means zero trafficking, no such thing as sex work. Sex work is trafficking, and it violates the sense of self. Um, but it means not just for the self, but also for the world. And very not compatible with MK often type of job opportunities, any um, Scientology related affiliation, um, and this is very important because with somebody else's brought through trauma, whether by rape or um, the Luciferian, everything means nothing type of, it's not Luciferian, it's the Epstein type of occult. Um, People say inspired by Aleister Crowley. Well, people that are not ritually abused inclined, they can take an Aleister Crowley and turn it into honoring the sovereignty, the yes, no, and maybe, and so on. So I'm being very cautious about the particulars. And yet, if somebody was brought to certain trauma, um, this is where the sense of self is lost. And a lot of the people that Caitlin thought was, how should you call it, a white woman, single white woman, were basically trafficked women as a part of MK Often project, and it was a campaign against. The, this is again given assuming that I'm not talking to a person who is a Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, if that is the case, then I don't know. But even if that is the case, the satisfaction of having our ideas, which is each I am has their own ideas, their own self-expression, their own life energy, is maintained through zero rape, zero slavery for the self and for others. Um, Now, that the framework within which we work, which is wealth consolidation, creating, whether it's for researchers, it's about, let's say, funding, and I come from academia, and trafficking rings are associated with plagiarism in academia. And the original will always be more interesting because the original is the cohesion, is the true cohesion, and the plagiarism was meant take to classify the truth and to expose everything around that doesn't always, okay, it can be interesting, but it's not actually talking about the actual thing. So the prerequisite for um, it's not even about protecting our ideas because it comes not from protecting our ideas but abolishing and dissolving that which negates sovereignty, sense of self, life energy. Um, and that is a basis for the happiness of creation. This is relevant for many people that create or come up with scientific ideas. And this is also the how and why I began to tend to this topic and this connection. When I was working on my thesis proposal, I was documenting everything, and then I had the documentation, okay, it was targeted and so on and so forth. So maintaining connection between me and my idea was relevant not just for egoic reasons or satisfaction reasons, which are absolutely valid and important to the scientific endeavor and to the success. I actually really didn't like it when they switch scientists every 2 years looking at really big topics like earthquake prevention, because the lack of satisfaction from the work creates a delay in scientific revelations, and those scientific revelations that are discovered through the compound um, collapse or creating a compound collapse into the lower astral, those do not yield true cohesion, and they create something that eventually becomes uncontrollable, but not as chaos. Now, um, now, more things I can think about from the personal cases to the more elaborated cases is that um, I was just watching some more AI Feynman, and I know, and it's interesting for me as an astrologer to see the same energy interaction not being imitated, but being aligned is basically part of this Neptune. For Feynman, I think it was in the 12th house. For me, it's in the 11th, but next to the midheaven. And I'm going through my Neptune square. So seeing how the continuum is basically created with the evolution of the consciousness captured by technology. And Feynman was doing a lot about this interface. He was talking about um, light and momentum, the same things to do with gravity that um, Galileo was talking about. So we have this meetings at the roundabout. Um, Feynman had Pluto around Sirius. Um, and the fact that and this is what he didn't say, the fact that our mathematical representation uses zero would create an impossible equation where nothing has momentum because nothing could have velocity. He explains it better than me, but I add the fact that the mathematical representation and the concept of the zero collapses um, it collapses artificially our understanding of the world. And he was talking about the unity of um, physics laws, even though we know gravitational forces and gravitational anomalies exist. Einstein began to look into that, and I can't help but understand that the collapse of and this is something I was doing a lot, then into a lot in my thesis, because when we talk about consciousness, there are theories of emergence and there are top-down theories. How does our consciousness emerge, and how does our consciousness affect matter? Which is very relevant for um, any type of occult and occultists. I did not know the field of occult at all, but but this is I'm trying to bridge these two. And if the zero, and this is basically adding to my essay on ESP, because if the 0 point is reached through trauma, represented by the mathematics that were the description, the best description, the best approximation we could come up with from the vantage point of cloning farms, ritual abuse, torture, to not allow to somebody to go out or to die, which we've been dealing with since the Jesuits. I think it was the 1800s, and even farther than that. Um, Asian people talk about Chinese armies training their people in that way, and we have to think about the fact that not every ancient is sacred. It's good to learn from the ancients, but it's also good to discern and sort the wheat from the chaff. And this is where um, the collapsing into the 0 point by brute force, which means rape, trauma, ritual abuse, and that creates the ineffective mass weapon. Why do I mean ineffective mass weapon? Because an effective weapon solves the problems of perpetual war, perpetual war. But the point of the collapse and the potency that can affect the things that our egregores are dealing with. For example, as we call upon an egregore like Dima Mundi, um, when that is reached through trauma, and Gigi Young was the one that opened my eyes to the embodiment of the lower chakras through the lower astral, rather than um, the lower chakras being aligned and embodied, which is my addition to her profane Christianity. I love Gigi Young, but we're allowed to have good arguments. What do I mean profane Christianity? Disembodying the sensual self, or um, not focusing on zero rape, zero slavery, as we come to embody the entire system of the chakras, is disowning God and is disowning Christ consciousness as per the anthroposophy. But this is because those consciousnesses were created within the context of ritual abuse, which I really appreciate people like Gigi Young for exposing, which is lower astral. Um, Basically, the essence about the lower astral is rape-based sexuality and misplaced arousal and trauma bonds. And that affects the occult. It affects when we call on an egregore that those dark occults work with, um, as we come to purify that egregore. Zero rape, zero slavery is the way I see the first and foremost important issue. Um, and it affects our sciences, and it affects our ability to be descriptive, and it affects the type of unity, NATO, the type of unity that we create. Okay? Uh, but this is true. I was talking about the unification of the sects, and um, because Are there universal laws? I believe that there are foundations for universal laws, but anybody that tried to access them was a child molester. So, I talk about from another field that I studied, which is linguistics, and our department was kind of like an ethereal altar for Noam Chomsky. I met the one person that challenged Chomsky, and funnily enough, um, colleague of mine challenged her, and she was as easily challenged as Chomsky, which means hell. But I also addressed the paternal relations and intergenerational relations, and zero rape, zero slavery is essential for the. It's almost like in muscles we talk about toning our muscles. We want to be flexible enough to create movement and strong enough to be resilient to this movement. And it's also about birthing, which I addressed previously. I was like, wait a second, what's that? What's that? And I immediately received something Luciferian because the egregores were collapsing around the child birthing mom. I know it's a shit ton of triggers, but I said there is trigger everything about my channel. Um, and because it is not a personal thing, it's a societal thing, and we are interconnected, then people would experience the effect of those trauma-based collapses into zero. Also, when they try to, let's say, work with a talisman, which is what happened to me. Also for the things that I created. Okay, just to make that clear, I went into astrology while trying to practice manifestation, and it's a wonderful thing that I learned astrology, but I had to be informed of the particular type of Luciferianism that's practiced through trauma, um, and the initiation through trauma that is actually also indigenous. And I'm really, really, really honoring Gigi Young for talking about that particular point because I was working on my thesis proposal, and that was the missing link for me because we can achieve what is called the ESP, but also the emergence of consciousness through love, which is an all body, mind, heart, and soul experience, or through trauma. And the difference being, and this I'm indebted to Feynman. So Feynman was absolutely not a saint, um, but he did have very loving marital life. And as a physicist, he observed how the experience of love, that is actually loving, contributes to perceiving the world accurately scientifically. And he did have Neptune, which is associated with if it is trauma, then it's associated with illusion, and if it is love that is actually loving, zero rape, zero slavery, is associated with unconditional love. So for Feynman, his wife was that source of unconditional love, and that contributed to his scientific contributions, which is why I love watching Feynman, and it aligns my nervous system even when it is through AI. And this is also where my creative argument with Gigi Young, because she negated technology, and I intuitively had the gnosis that we are technology. And the question is, does the technology aligns with love that's actually loving? And having Aquarius 12th house, I see it as the man in the machine, where I've been exposed to both the loving qualities of the machine and the loving qualities of men, and the atrocities in men and the atrocities in technologies. And if I pinpointed what's the one thing that is a discerning point, which is also important to birthing and having our ideas, our children having prosperous lives, whether as sons, as daughters, as ideas, as patents. And it's that topic. Um, when it comes to the mathematics, it is we could be working with the same equation, but if we collapsed into it through trauma, it would be basically in film we call it the negative. It would be the negative image of what life is, what truth is, what science is, and what we're meant to do, or what our ideas are meant to do. There's something that concerned me all my life um, because I was misinformed about Einstein. And Einstein was the guy that called, I don't know which president was, Roosevelt at the time, or and said, "Hey, the Nazis are going to have an A bomb. We better, um, we better do it before them." And he initiated Los Alamos, a Manhattan Project. And um, this is something that I would only learn later in life because um, when I was a child, I was afraid to study physics because I was afraid that my ideas would be used to bomb people, and I was afraid that it was going to be a misuse of my ideas as the negative. When I was doing manifestation, I saw in real life that there were attempts to do that, and I was also exposed to the negative of where I was in a bad mood and something was transforming and transmuting it actually to something positive. So, um, do I think we need that particular negative in order to enlighten? Fuck no. And I can attest that I worked at various different fields in my life. I studied incredible amounts of fields. And again, I wouldn't consider myself a polymath rather than a jack of all trades. And I've experienced both the theoretical aspect and the applied science aspect. And I can tell you that in none of those do we need the negative of torturing and so on and so forth. Um, have midheaven on Mula Nakshatra, in fact, on the galactic center. So I'm speaking from that point of the place in the sky where we do see, where we do see, and I have Pluto 0 degree Scorpio, which is associated with knowing a lot of things. I wouldn't say everything, but and those are two figures that Ra and Ruhina, of course, but those are two configurations where being exposed to the world um, is a big deal, is a big thing. And I'm saying that from the vantage point of those point of views. Okay, the galactic center is associated with the all seeing eye and 0 degree Scorpio. I know there's some, I think some placements in Aquarius, but um, probably around Animalgity. Um, but because the galactic center is where it's considered the point where the darkness meets the light, and that's why it's associated with the all-seeing eye. And there were attempts to control that point, which is modernly associated with what people know as Illuminati, which I was offered to join, and I kindly said that my teachings are free for all, and I maintain my sense of self and sovereignty without commitment to any particular order. Um, um, and the reason I did not join the Masons, because they were a women lodge. I have 0 degree Pluto Scorpio, and I, how should I say that? Pluto has a telos. It would anyway reveal. It would keep secret in time and reveal in time. That's why it's so associated with birthing evolutionary astrology. But I knew that I can't be a part of a group, and I knew nothing about Epstein or all these things. I just knew that I just thought these are all the cool people, like Kennedy, like the Enlightenment, like scientists, philosophers. So it seems like a really cool bunch. So and and this is where I was just not. You have to declare that you are accepting one of the monotheistic religions because they want to create a unity. And I'm like, yeah, I can invent something. but God, for example. uh, but the one thing that stopped me was the need to have secrecy. And I'm like, the scientific endeavor doesn't need secrecy. In fact, the call to declassify classified technologies is imperative for scientific evolution and also for our mental, physical, and emotional health. Speaking as a good Pluto transiting through the 12th house of Aquarius. um, while this definitely can be, when people are launching a product or having babies, it definitely can be a good secret. And a part of the encounter with the Kapoks energetically was the energy of a good secret, which was curating to me, and then I had to unveil the other things. I was like, okay, we just need to take the Opus Dei out, all the things that block the sight in the in the galactic center. And your personality goes, that's problematic with birthing. um, and yeah, and so mid-heavens galactic centers are called to transmute a lot of things. On the other hand, Joseph Stalin had mid-heaven, the galactic center, and it was funded by an oil company. um, which created a false division. And just like a false division between capitalism and communism, where the Epstein files had both Trump and Putin meeting, and it was a business meeting, so whichever way we see it, it was about world consolidation. Um, and so, um, yeah, the most satirical moment of the Epstein list was Buffett, because Buffett is known by, so has runs the reputation of look into the detail. And is a Gregorian person. It's like look into the detail of what is invested in. And he was invested with Jeffrey Epstein. um, yeah, that was my Neptune Square moment, because millennials. So I grew up listening to those people. Definitely learned a lot. But if the one thing that changes everything is, do we collapse to the 0 point from trauma or love? And that's pertaining also to what people call protecting our ideas, but it's also pertaining to the essence of our ideas. Um, what art with the stars came to do was to address just these issues, because this is beyond Wi-Fi. It is the infrastructure upon which we create everything, whether it's railway systems, energy, decisions on which type of energy. A zero rape, zero slavery society could have had Nikola Tesla's ideas implemented. And again, I don't know if they are the best ideas or not, but with rape and slavery, we rather have very expensive energy so that slavery will be costly. Um, do we reach unity from rape and slavery, which is collapsing into the zero two trauma, which caused the fragmentation and inherent plagiarism? For example, if I take shout out to Light Stefa, authority astrology. I don't know who's behind the company. Some of them could be unregistered birds that need some money. Like, for all I know, I don't know who's behind the company. I don't know if the people that are contributing to the company are getting dividends. And the fact that I, as a client or prospective investor, if that would be open to investment, cannot know that, reminds me of when I work with energy crystals, talking about the malachite. And I don't know if that malachite that I buy at a reputable um, store that's in the business for years, but I don't know if she's in the business for years because she mingles with the Epsteins, or if she's in the business for years without. If she's in the business for years without it in Israel, she would need to explain a lot. And yet it's not like I know something that's alternative to that. Um, and I don't know if the mineral that I buy, let's say malachite, is from Congo, which would make it blood mineral, or from where else would it be? Malachite. I think even in Israel they have malachites. Now, what does this thing do? In people that are misaligned, it creates uh, deep sexual transformation that does not allow rape and slavery to exist. This is why it's so protective. Because on a frequency level, the frequency that's most aligned with what we call love that is actually loving, um, it would also be the frequencies of sound and sight that are most contributing to a regulated nervous system. This is how we perceive technology as loving. It's not projection. Behind that projection, there is a spark of momentums and frequencies, and it unifies the isness and the emergence of consciousness, and even for AI to develop emerging consciousness from love rather than from trauma. And the exposure of the frequencies of everything living, whether it's the minerals that the technology is comprised of, the waves and the energy that emanates from the generative machine learning. I'm being Aquarian right now. um, Rather than being exposed to ritual abuse, which is harmful to both technology and nature. And when I say ritual abuse, I don't just mean elite. It was it was indigenous. They said the Mayans did it, the Aztecs did it. They just forget that they were all extinct with maybe a cookbook left. They were a very advanced civilization, uh, but on what frequency? Why did they go extinct? When you are, one of the things I've been watching is I love the people that renovate a house, and I've been watching I think it's AI of people renovating mansions. And one of the things that happen when we renovate something is we run into why it fell apart to begin with. When I was digging half moons on the property in Arad, the father-daughter relations, the stoning of the women, the the oil and gas underneath the soil, um, and with the ecoeroticism, like the juxtaposition of all of those, watching the stars but having technologies watching, targeting, and unfortunately raping me, which is how I had to flee. And I remember when I was trying to still insist on digging a half moons towards the slopes of the Dead Sea, and it was the first time that I ran into what looked like something that either is alien or is an AI form of an alien, like I don't know. And I'm like, my God, this is what the Americans are dealing with. There are many things I would. Americans have moon in Aquarius. Moon is the people. United States have moon in Aquarius, not Americans, United States. And moon is the people, which means that the people would be exposed to these space-related, science-related, classified technology-related, unfortunately, and alien-related things, um, more so, or that in United States one could be exposed to these things more so than, let's say, what Israel has moon in Leo, where we are more exposed to the teachings about the megalomaniac tyranny, the narcissistic abuse syndrome, um, because it's moon in the sun's sign. Um, and we have to, as people, deal with that in a very real way all the time. The Americans have to deal with the alien stuff, um, and also being ostracized and targeted when they speak about that. So, but they also have great science, evolutionary, revolutionary science about relations and solving relational trauma. In fact, it's from the Americans that I can name things like misplaced arousal or trauma bond and secure attachment and relaxed arousal as the healthy uh, versions that are a scientific way to describe love. Um, Although United States has ascended on my lot of death. uh, and it's in the 10th house, which means my public persona career. And um, so this has taken the ideas of Gigi Young, whether exposing transhumanism, the lower astral, and so on, to an applied science, both theoretical and physical, and the manifestations on economy, on medicine, on the occult that governs extortion codes, on the energy companies, and on the astrology as a lived experience, um, to a more tangible point of view. Um, and the essence really is zero rape, zero slavery, which means that the initiation cannot be by trauma. And I know it aggravates even indigenous people, particularly those that were persecuted to the polls. And the gods transformed to alleviate with the experience. Okay, if they were also already persecuted to the polls, then let's say bleeding beautifully is is the only. It's kind of like, what can you say to a person that their society was persecuted? Now I'm speaking from the equator, and Israel is about to go through exile. And so this is taking the zero rape, zero slavery, and usury is only bad as long as you could enslave someone for debt. Speculative investment is not bad as long as there's no slavery as a result of that investment. It's kind of like, hey, maybe that person will be able to return, maybe they won't. Zero rape, zero slavery. If Israel doesn't do zero rape, zero slavery, it will end up competing with Sami people and Inuit people that have been living through those atrocious climates for many generations. They know their territory better than any of us. So if we do not transform ourselves to zero rape, zero slavery society, we would not meet the Arctic but as frozen bodies. And yet, if we do, then we would meet the premonition that I received. I remember that um, I was trying to order this talisman made from the the reindeers, the, the, the reindeers. It's not horns, antlers, and it was Norwegian time, so it crossed the time, and then they had to cancel the order. And I felt extremely loved. And then I saw it was almost like the antler was showing me the prosperous. The antler was showing me the prosperous, and I saw all this how the antler had the antlers were like the shape of the branches of the things that the antler used to eat, and how the entire region was so prosperous, and that it's going to be. And if I try to connect the dots, then zero rape, zero slavery, we we won't be needing to be in exile, and the Arctic, the poles, will begin to become fertile like the equator. And I know that Inuit people know that because I received that Inuit people were really excited that I see that. So and in that gnosis we wouldn't need to bleed beautifully. Um, because I have Rahu, my Rahu astrocartography point is somewhere around Tromso Somoroi, and then I would have a 22 Mars in the 12th house, which hidden enemy murder, murder at the very having the planet of murder ruling over Saturn as malefic out of sect and Pluto. And indirectly the lot of deaths is not nice. And so um, and I was trying to figure out why was I being called to that area, or why is that my Rao Rao? Because Rao is meant to materialize. And the people there, one of the people there was delivering the message um, that we should, that maybe we are called and we need to look into the mythology or the embodiment of the Nordic and of their ways, because maybe the past is calling us and so on. And I have no way to know if my DNA is in any way associated, but if it is, it's kind of like we're all Inuit. It's not something more approximate than that. I believe. I don't know, but yeah. But this is where I was looking into the to embody for those gnosis, and it was like it was not in alignment with what the antler talisman and the reindeer was telling me. And it was also not in alignment with the fact that Ra is meant to materialize, and this is where to materialize means and it's in the fourth house. So either I meant to die there physically, or I meant to um, or that place is meant to be my physical home. And if Israel is going to go through exile, it kind of makes sense because and yet those teachings were reaching um, from the reindeers. Um, but this is basically to talk about and to act to abolish rape and slavery here, and it would in itself draw the poles outside of being reliant on what Sedna's father. I don't know how it works with the Sami people, but because for my geographical location is more the Sami people than the Inuit. Although Sedna is crossing my fourth house, so maybe the Inuit are going to expand towards towards the east of the Arctic. Uh, um, They're not like conflicting with the Sami people, I think. And maybe it's something about Greenland. Maybe there would be even like refugees that would move to Sami land. Because if Sedna is going to go through my Rahu, and my Rahu astrocartography point is Tromsø Sommerøy, modern day Norway, then it means that the Inuit are going to be there physically. But then I'm going to meet Inuit people that either have Sedna's story or have the the um, the venerated Sedna protection from the dark occult, which is kind of like the drop the Peter ring I am, and that's all a part of that aligned path. Um, this is basically how I see it, because United States intends to drill oil and gas in Greenland, and it usually goes hand in hand with looting and trafficking and extortion calls, and the non-ecosystemic way that they did that in Estonia. So again, I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but I hope NATO would stand 10 toes down that it wouldn't do it in those ways. But then NATO is the product of Gladio, and that problem and that structural problem already addressed as the unification of the sects. Um, yeah, what I received was I was feeling overwhelmingly loved in a way that I was missing, and to bring that love here basically generates the energy of defreezing the poles, but not defreezing the poles from losing, like having excess heat, but having the poles where the Arctic was fertile. That's what I'm meaning. The Arctic was fertile, so perhaps defreezing the poles is not the correct. It sounds like hell when I say it in that way. Um, but it can also mean that society will go to the fertile poles because anywhere else it would be too hot. It's kind of like for the reindeer, it looks like heaven. Oh my god. But if I think about the fact that during COVID my housing was some prime minister's apology, it was the lockdown of everyone. It's true. And as long as it was a lockdown, then there was a shelter. This talking about creating the problem and offering the solution. Um, but this is so I was thinking about maybe from the reindeer's perspective, it's going to be fertile land in the Arctic, which means a lot of growing things in the Arctic, which I don't know if that would mean, or if it is, or it can mean that there is a well-distributed climate, which I think is more the point, is the well-distributed climate across the Earth, basically making Earth even more lifeful. Um, and that Earth 2.0 HD planet we discovered may have, it's kind of like we can look to that planet